Hi, welcome to SerpentSong Sanctuary to Annapurna Gardens. I'm Xanna Seto, and I am so glad you're here. I really am glad you're here today. I have had something on my mind, and that is that I am wondering how you're doing. How are you holding out? We're all under a collective, incredible amount of stress right now. I know that there's all these memes that say we're all in this together, but it's very easy to feel isolated and alone in these times, especially as winter is coming on. You'll notice that it's quite a bit darker these days. The days at my latitude, at least, are getting quite short, and it's getting colder, as you can see by the way that I'm dressed. So this is asking us to move indoors more, to draw within even more, and we're already so isolated at this point that can be kind of a scary thing. I know that a lot of people are beginning to suffer from depression and anxiety and all of the things that come from being severed from our usual means of support. So I'd like to know, what are you doing to take care of yourself right now? For myself, I'm still coming outside. I think that's a really, really important thing to do. Luckily, I have a beast of a dog that forces me to walk a few miles a day. And I have the garden that still needs some tending. I'm putting bulbs in today for spring, which is another thing that I'm doing. I'm doing things that are going to last or going to see fruition in a projected future. So I'm actually planting hope when I plant these bulbs for the spring. Now, another thing that I'm doing, and I will admit, is I'm soothing myself with good food, comforting myself with good food. And comfort food doesn't necessarily have to be bad for you. We can make healthy comfort food. So last week's video, making the potato dumplings, as involved as it was, as laborious a process as it was, it really helped ground me in. It helped bring me back into my body. And that's an important thing for us to do in these days. So I thought, why not do a little kind of a mini series of videos in the kitchen, bring it out of the garden for a little while because it's getting cold, and let's face it, there's not as much going on out here. So bring it out of the garden for a little while and focus on making some nice, healthy, comforting, and mostly simple meals. So I would like to invite you into the kitchen for a bit for the next few videos, and we'll come up with some really delicious, yummy, soothing recipes that you'll enjoy not only for yourself, but also to be able to pay that comfort, pay that soothing forward to someone else and share it. Because after all, why do we take care of ourselves? What's the primary reason? For me, it's so that I can be healthy enough and in an emotionally and physically and materially stable enough place that I can then take care of others. So let's take a little side adventure here into the kitchen for a little while. And I'm gonna get some things done out here in the garden today, and I will meet you in the kitchen later this evening. Welcome back to the kitchen. When I said earlier that I wanted to know how you're doing, I meant that. So maybe leave me a little comment below to let me know what you're doing to help comfort and soothe yourself in these trying times. All right, so we're gonna get started with our Apple Galette. Now, an Apple Galette, a galette is actually it's like a pie, but it's very rustic, quite easy to do. It takes a little bit of time simply because there's some waiting time, but the actual preparation is simple and pretty quick. So let's see, let me go ahead and grab my apples. These are just some of the apples that I harvested from my friend's orchard, and I'm going to use them to make this beautiful galette. So I'm going to twist off the stems really quickly. I've got them washed already. Once I've got the stems twisted off, I just want to half them. I'm going to grab a paring knife. I'm going to quarter them out and just remove any stem that's left and the core. Okay, I've got my apples all cored and destemmed now. Some people peel their apples, and if you prefer not to have the peeling, that's fine, but I don't mind some peel. I think there's a lot of nutrition in there. That's where the sun, that good sun energy has been hitting them all summer long. Now what I want is I want enough apples to make about 6 cups because I'm trying to get 2 galettes out of this. Now I'm just going to make smaller slices. I did have about 2 apples too many, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save those by putting them in a dish to cover in the fridge, and I'm going to add a little bit of lemon juice to that just so they don't brown up. And I'll set those aside and stick them in the fridge. All right, so the lemon, what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take a half a lemon, grab a strainer, and a small fork. There you go. And a zester. So first, before I juice the lemon, the half lemon, I'm just going to get some of this lovely zest and get that in there as well. And this is optional. You don't have to do the lemon zest. I just kind of like that extra tangy pop of flavor. And then I'm going to put my strainer over. I don't know if you can see this, but let's put this here. I'm going to put my strainer over and take a fork and stick it right into that lemon half and just twirl the fork around just to break up those cells and get as much of that lovely juice out as I can. That's a juicy one. And now to this, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, maybe a little more. And 1 teaspoon of ground ginger. And a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cardamom. I love cardamom. Oh God, that aromatic property is just delightful. And I think I'm gonna go with, let's go with a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I don't want to overdo it on the salt here. There we are. Okay, maybe not even that much. A little less than a 1/4 teaspoon. And then we're also gonna do, well, actually, before we do that, I'm gonna transfer all of this into a bowl. And I'm going to add to that 1 teaspoon of vanilla, pure vanilla extract. Give this a mix and get them all nice and coated with the spices. Oops. I'm gonna let this sit while I prepare the dough. For the dough, we have 2 1/4 cups of flour. I'm using gluten-free, of course, because it's me. And I'm using a 1/4 cup of cornmeal. I came across this suggestion as I was researching different galette recipes. And I thought, wow, that sounds interesting. Why don't we try it? So here it is. And then we're going to do, let's see, a 1/4 cup of sugar. Now, I'm using coconut sugar because it's lower on the glycemic index. And this is a pastry. It's a pastry dough, and it doesn't need to be sweet. So, not cloyingly sweet. So, I'm just gonna use the coconut sugar. All right. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take some butter, and I'm using a dairy-free butter, so vegan butter. And what I've done is I put it in the freezer so that I can use the box grater to grate it into the flour. And I want this really cold, so I don't want to let it get, oops, too warm. I'm just going to move this around a little bit in the flour just to keep it small and loose. There we are. Oops. Now you could use a food processor as well, but I like to really be right on top of what's going on with the pastry dough. So I like to have a hands-on approach. There we go. And you just want to keep mixing that in as you go very slightly, just to coat these little squiggles of butter, with air quotes, butter. There we are. Just so they don't get too big and clumpy. All right, so that has been shredded in, and like I said, I froze it for about 20 minutes, maybe half an hour, because you want that butter nice and cold. You don't want to end up with a paste as you're working it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it in. If you don't have one of these pastry cutters, you can use a fork. I'm going to cut it in. Just until I've got pieces that are about the size of a pea. So not too much. We don't want to overwork this dough at all. So that looks pretty good. I don't know if you can see that. Just some little flakes of butter in there, and I can still feel it pretty cold, so that's good. So now what I need is a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. I'm going to go ahead and drizzle that around. There we are. And then I've got a 1/4 cup of really cold water. It can be ice cold, or if your tap water is pretty cold, you can use that as well. I'm just going to work this in little by little, just to make sure I don't over moisten the dough. Get my cutter again. And I think that is going to be perfect. So okay, so test it out here. See if it's ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab just a handful, press it together, and you see that it looks like it's going to form. So I think we're good. All right. So again, you don't want to overwork this dough. Make sure that you just get it to where it's nice and crumbly, just like this. So now I'm going to throw a little bit of flour out on my counter. And I'm going to dump the dough out. I'm just going to pull it together. And then I'm going to grab my not so favorite thing. This is plastic wrap, but sometimes it's a necessary evil. It obviously doesn't like me either. Never been good with this stuff. All right, we're gonna press this down, pick it up and turn it over. So it looks kind of sketchy right now, but we're going to put it back in the fridge for an hour, and during that time it's going to come together a little bit more. So it'll definitely be more dough-like. But we want to wrap it in plastic because we don't want the dough to dry out. So I'm going to press it down into kind of a rough disc shape. And as you have, if you have it a little thinner, it'll cool off a little more quickly. There. Okay, and there you have it. not quite a disc, more like an amoeba, but we'll put this in the fridge for 1 hour. It's been about half an hour since I put the apples aside, and in that time, they have drained a little bit of juice. So in this galette, we don't want the filling to be too liquid because it would have a tendency to be soggy if that were the case. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour off the liquid. Not a whole lot of liquid, but that's okay. Okay, since I didn't have a whole lot of liquid, I'm going to add just a couple of tablespoons of water. I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of this amazing homemade jam that I made this summer out of cherries, figs, and blackberries. And you can use any kind of store-bought jam. Apricot jam would be especially good. And I'm also going to add 1 tablespoon of maple syrup. And you could also do a brown sugar or something like that. I wouldn't suggest cooking honey because it has a compound in it when you cook it. It's slightly toxic to the body. So if you're adding honey to anything that you've cooked or tea or whatever, make sure you add it after you take it away from the flame. I'm just going to stir this up, mix it up, and let it cook until it gets to a kind of a syrupy texture. This will be the glaze for the galette. I'm also going to add the slightest pinch of salt just to bring out the flavor a little bit more. Okay, that took about 5 minutes or so. And yeah, it's a nice syrupy consistency with the chunks of cherry and fig. It's pretty nice. So I'm going to set that aside because this is what we're going to brush over the top of the fruit once I get it into the pastry dough. Before I get the dough out, I just wanted to add that the reason I really love galette is because it's so versatile. You can put fruit in it, you can put veggies in it, cheese, if you eat cheese, meat, if you eat meat. It hosts any number of things. Okay, I pulled my dough out a couple of minutes ago. I'm letting it rest for a moment so that it's not so crumbly when I try to work it. When it's cold, it tends to crack. So just letting it warm up just a little bit. And then I'm gonna grab my my roller. And I really like this one because it has these little measurement ends. So I want to be able to roll out about 1/8 of an inch. There we go. It's 1/4, so. All right, and then I'm gonna lightly flour my surface. Lightly flour my rolling pin. Beautiful. Then I'm just gonna bring my dough into my workspace. And work it up just a little bit. press it down, make sure it's not sticking. There we go. Then I'm going to start to roll it out. And keep turning it so that I can roll it into a rough circle. And it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, you don't want it to be perfect because it looks a little better the more rustic it is. So now I'm going to make sure that I'm not sticking by taking my bench scraper, and you can use a long knife as well if you don't have a bench scraper. I'm going to pull the dough onto the rolling pin so that I don't break it when I transfer it onto the baking sheet. Lovely. Okay, now I'm going to take 1 tablespoon of light brown sugar and just sprinkle it onto the base, kind of leaving about maybe a 2.5 inch border. And now we're going to bring our apples in. So I like to get creative. If you want to, you can just kind of throw them in topsy-turvy and fold it in over that, but I like it to be a little more decorative. Looks like I did make way too many apples, but that's okay. I'm gonna make some applesauce. This is half the dough, as I said, and I just wanted to say that I did put the other half in the fridge, back in the fridge, until I'm ready to use it. Okay, so now what happens, I'm just gonna make sure that we don't have any major cracks going on. I'm also gonna thin out the very edges a little bit. Again, bring that bench scraper in. Okay. And start to pull it up over. Just let it drape. And then every so often, I'm going to make a fold. And just fold that in. Just making sure there's no openings. I think I could have added a little bit more water to my dough, but I believe it'll be okay. So we'll see. We'll grab a small bowl. We have 1 egg. Oh, I think it's a duck egg. really hard shells. So this is the way that I like to separate the eggs. It's by just dropping the yolk into my palm and letting the whites just slide through my fingers. There we go. Okay, but that'll be a yummy yolk. So if you want this to be a vegan dish, just omit the egg. Not a problem. It'll still cook up beautifully, just like it is. Yep, simple as that. So now I'm going to take the egg yolk and just brush the outside of the dough with this. And then not to forget our glaze. So I'm going to take the brush once again. I'm going to brush the apples with this. I'm reserving about half for my second galette. Oops. And then the last step is optional as well. Just a little sprinkle of raw sugar all on the edges. So there it is. I am going to set this aside and get the other one going, and then we'll put them both in the oven at 425 for 30 to 35 minutes. So you may have seen a moment ago, before I put the galettes in the oven, or before I actually made the second galette, that I did add a little bit more water to the dough, and I think it made it a little more workable. So I would say add somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 of a cup of cold water to your initial dough. Okay. Now I also put both galettes in the oven, and I don't have enough room to put them both on the same shelf in the pans that I have them in. So what I'm going to do is, in just a few seconds, I'm going to switch their positions so that the one on the bottom will be on the top for the rest of the time, just so that they both get a chance to really cook well on the underside, because that's just as important as being done around the top. So I think we're about ready to do that. those are looking good. I'm pretty excited. Okay, a full 30 minutes has passed now, so let's go ahead and open the oven and see what we've got. Oh, wow. Yes. Beautiful. Whoops. Oh, yeah. Hey, watch out, it's hot. Careful, kitties. Wow. I know it's tempting to dive right in, but let them sit and cool for about 15 minutes at least. And here we are. Wow, so this beautiful galette. This is the crust that I didn't add the extra water to, so fingers crossed that it's not too crumbly, but it did hold together during baking, so it's a promising sign. All right, let's see what it tastes like. I'm pretty excited. Wow, nice. All right, let's bring this in onto the plate. And I like a little bit of coconut cream on mine. So we'll add a little dollop of coconut cream on that. Yum. I really like that it's not too sweet at all. It's just, I mean, the fruit really stands out. Nice crust. Yeah. Definitely, definitely. So this is something to curl up with a hot cup of tea and a good book, which is exactly what I think I'm gonna do. I'm even gonna grab another piece and maybe a little bit bigger. I've also got that other beautiful galette waiting for Pat and Mike for tomorrow morning. So I'll be taking that over there to thank them for sharing their beautiful apple harvest with me. And there you go. Something really yummy to snuggle up and cozy up with a good book and fill your belly and yeah, just all the warm fuzzies. So I hope that you've enjoyed our adventure through the land of galette, of Apple Galette. And remember, it's very versatile. You can make it with just about anything you could dream of. So have fun experimenting. If and when you do, please comment down below. Let me know how it goes. And if you like what you're seeing here, please consider subscribing. And until I see you next time, be nourished, be inspired, and be transformed. I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Yeah, I said not together.